I'll talk about the debates around how we reached there, a brief thing about the process, and then what the major debates are. Because it is not about this is what we need to do in Bangladesh and this is what we need to do in Nepal or in Bhutan or in Pakistan. But the debates are certainly debates that you need to have in each of these countries. What our law does is the following. It gives about 4 or 5 major guarantees. It guarantees 75% of rural households and 50% of urban households 25 kilos of almost free rice or wheat or millets. It gives 800 million people in the country about 50% of their cereal consumption requirements almost free. That's number one thing that it does. Number two, it guarantees hot cooked meals to all children who study, children between the ages of 6 and 14 in all government or government aided schools. Number three, it guarantees supplementary nutrition to children below the age of 6. And then for pregnant women, it guarantees 2 things. One is that it guarantees one meal a day, and second is that it guarantees maternity benefits. Briefly, this is what it does, and some kind of, it institutes some kind of framework for enforcement, which I'll talk about as well. As I emphasized repeatedly, we are not presenting this act as an ideal act in any kind of way. We are not saying that this is something that needs emulation. What we are only saying is that it would be interesting for us in different South Asian countries to look at the discussions that went into the debate. The first debate was whether the state should provide food to its populations at all. So, is there any business, why should the state be providing food to its populations? Now, suppose we assume that yes, the state does have a duty of social protection. The second question is, should the social protection duties of the state, the food and social protections, be embedded in law, or should they be just programs of government? The third debate was that should the law be restricted to aspects of social protection and food state provisioning, or should it be broader and encompass a whole range of questions related to which are important and critical for preventing and addressing the basic causes of hunger. Okay, if the state needs to provision social protection to its food and nutrition vulnerable populations, should it do this by cash or should it do it by food? Okay, we've agreed that the state should provision food, it should be in food and not in cash, it should be perhaps backed by a law. All of this we've got past. Should it be universal or should it be targeted? Then there are very specific questions around the protection of children. And here I just talk about 2 or 3 things. One is the question about, school meals. Look after children, gives one hot meal to every child who is in school between 6 and 14 years. What about the child who's not in school? The debate 7 is about gender just food security laws, recognizing that women and girls tend to be more food vulnerable even within the family, poses a whole set of challenges. And the last set of these 10 debates is about the enforcement system. And here I'll just quickly say, there's no point in having a right where if you make a claim, there's no way to enforce it. So these are the range of debates, and I just wanted to illustrate, and the whole point of this discussion was not that India made the right choices, but I think we, through this 13-year period, we were able to at least understand some of the major choices that need to be made while drafting a food security law.
In Brazil, we work with the right to food from a very broad understanding of right to adequate food that is, it relates both to food but also to nutrition, to water, to sanitation, to land, to access to resources, to all the issues related with jobs, recreation, and also social protection. So the right to food in Brazil is not seen only as a social protection issue, but it's also seen as how people access their income. The Constitutional Assembly defined a constitution that was very rights-oriented. So we have a context of a very strong constitutional rights-based law in Brazil. We had a very strong movement against corruption in the early 90s, and this movement was very strongly linked to the movement of right to food. And that's exactly when the merge between the food security part and the human rights part got together for the first time. In 93, 94, we had a national conference that was carried out by, civil society and the government. This conference was organized by Conselho. What is Conselho? Conselho was a council created in 93 by the Brazilian government upon the request from civil society. In 2006, the National Food Security Law was passed. When the law came in 2006, it made it official. Conselho became an official part of the government, and also the law created something called the National Food and Nutritional Security System. The National Food and Nutritional Security System is basically all the institutions that work with food and nutrition in the country are part of the system that is responsible to promote the right to adequate food for all. The law reaffirms all the obligations of the state under the human rights law, so reaffirms the obligations of the government to respect, protect, and fulfill human rights. It reaffirms the obligation of the state to provide recourse mechanisms to all people. In 2007, the government passed another law that is called the creation of Kaizen. Kaizen is a coordination of ministries. Aside from having the right to food in the Constitution, we had the decision to have the National Food and Nutritional Security Policy, and in 2011 we had the first national plan. So you see, it's a long history from 96, from 94, when we first created the council, all the way to 2011 to have the first national plan, formal national plan. The National Food and Nutritional Security Conference is the highest body. And as I said, it has delegates from all over the country and from the 3 levels of government. Going now to the National Food and Nutritional Policy, I think it's interesting to see what is the result of this process all. There are 8 points. Universal access to adequate and healthy diets, sustainable and decentralized food supply and systems, talking about sustainable production, extraction, processing, and distribution of food, institution of permanent processes of capacity development, research and training, universalization, but also targeting the most affected communities. They are the main priority, the indigenous peoples. There is also a branch that discusses food and nutrition actions at all levels of healthcare, prevention of malnutrition, identification of malnutrition, treatment of malnutrition, and also prevention of publicity that is harmful to people, such as publicity of food directed to children. And then there is an international component that the Brazilian government should work with international level and international negotiation processes, defending food sovereignty in the right to adequate food, and that Brazil has been very active in the international scene. As a matter of fact, the Committee on World Food Security has really benefited quite a bit from the Brazilian experience in its late reform.
What's the current state of play in your country with some of these debates and with the development of national food security? Where do you still think your country needs to go? Where do things, in your opinion, need strengthening, or where are the gaps? And what have you heard today from the two case studies that has maybe given you some fresh ideas that you think, well, I think there's a bit of a gap here, and I can maybe now see a slightly different perspective on how I might be able to meet that gap. So anything we can hear from the country presentations in that sort of a format, I think would be really useful, because then it helps us to understand, well, what does the experience of India look like to you from your perspective? What does the experience of Brazil look like to you? What seems to be the really promising areas where you think, well, maybe I hadn't thought of that, but now that's maybe you want to go away and think more about this area. Or you might just look at, say, some of the debates that happened in the run-up to India's National Food Security Act, and you might think, well, we've been having exactly those debates. We've come out in a completely different place. That would be really interesting to understand.
Brazil has tried to cover several things under the bill, where India has narrowed it down to some of the aspects. And we focused on our discussion on some of the priority things like social protection or safety net. We found that the coverage and the outreach and the quality of implementation is not adequate. So it's an implementation issue as well as it is a policy issue, because the way it is thought of, it is more from the welfare approach or charity approach rather than the right-based approach. So it is a need to shift the debate, shift the perspective from the government side as well as from the civil society side. We also talked about how it can have a better impact on the people's life. There are several schemes, about 99 schemes, and it is being implemented by 21 ministries. So it is a huge gap between the different ministries, the coordination gap is there, and also the budget allocated for social safety net are underutilized and not very prioritized, or it is designed in a coordinated manner. We have also discussed that how we can think about a longer term solution like comprehensive agrarian reform. As an immediate solution, we also thought about that we are going to map who are the important stakeholders, CSOs, and also map out the political commitment from the government sides and policy documents, what are the existing available things. Then we can build on that, what is already made available from the government side, the policies and the schemes. We have Safe Food Act. So how we can take the next step, that will be depending on our existing situation.
We have very high malnutrition, even though we are producing a lot of food and we are like a food surplus country. But especially in the dry zone and hilly area, we are experiencing very high malnutrition. So I think it will be reduced or they eliminate through the school day meal program. The other one is the social protection. So now the old age pension is on our way. So not yet ended, but it will be ended very soon. But it does not currently cover for the single woman. So we also need to discuss this issue. So I would like to ask, especially from India, Bangladesh, and the Nepal, to have some linkage and share information about, the decentralization and also rural development law. The government want to focus only on their program, so that we have to convince them to expand the scope, because the rural development only cover water and sanitation, electricity supply, off-grid, especially for the rural infrastructure and the road. But we want to see rural development law to be more comprehensive, like food security or the right to food like this.
In Pakistan, 58% people are food insecure, which means this serious attention is required to identify why people are so much food insecure is. what are the program, and whether they are working or not. And we also discuss how we can start our work, where we can start our work. We also identify where we can map our resources. We identify that government has planned almost drafted national food security policy. We also try to map what existing laws exist in Pakistan, so that we can focus, we can analyze that those laws, those policies, programs to help us to start our work in country food in Pakistan. We also try to map the public sector development program with budget allocation, how much, what they are focusing, whether they are contributing to food security or not, whether they are contributing, they are focusing government or not, whether they are focusing right of food or not. We also try to map different other places who are working.
And today's two presentations, especially two case studies, these are very useful for us. We found them very useful. These are the documents that we were looking for, because we have already initiated the process of civil society draft bill on framework legislation. So we have produced 0 draft, and that has been published, and that is supposed to be disseminated among the wide range of stakeholders for their comments and suggestions. And then we will revise that and we will convert that into model legislation, civil society legislation. Definitely we will replicate some of the experiences from India and Brazil. Especially in Brazilian case, the civil society involvement in the food security system, that has been very interesting for us. So that interests us, and we will definitely consider revising the preliminary draft bill to include that aspect as well.
I think in terms of lessons learned, we've gone through a lot of programmatic debates. But if I was asked on what are the key elements in terms of the process of lawmaking, one is of course what the government will do. But I think a good starting point is for civil society to come together to have a model version of their act. We should not draft it keeping in mind the constraints we have, because that's what government will do. But we should draft it as an advocacy document which we can share with our communities, which we can use as a means of conscientizing our people to the human rights discourse, and which we use as a tool for consensus building. That is what we did in India, not very successfully. We did have a draft document, but we had to go through a lot of pains, because any such negotiation is really a negotiation between the real and the ideal.
The UK Department for International Development is committed to tackling global poverty, and we're always looking for new ways to do that with greater impact. But one of the areas that we're taking a particularly close look is on the issue of food and nutrition security. And in particular, we're working with India, because India recently passed a National Food Security Act, and that was quite a landmark decision, and we think that that's a useful and interesting thing for other developing countries to learn from. Because it's always useful to see what another country has done, to compare and contrast their approach. So we're not saying India has all the answers, but we are saying that to learn together with somebody else may help you to get there better and quicker than if you go alone. And judging by the outcome of today, I think there's been a lot of appetite to take some further steps towards some joint learning with India as developing countries try and strengthen their own approaches to food and nutrition security.
I think the time, from the experience that I saw, the time is ripe for people to implement the right to adequate food in the different countries. There is an open interest in the part of civil society to use these tools to implement the right to adequate food so that we guarantee food security for all.
Right to Food conference we have just completed is very inspiring. As I am coming from Myanmar, we have learned a lot of experience from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal and Brazil. The most inspiring thing is the 2 case study from India and Brazil.
We see the poverty is increasing, food insecurity is increasing, and in keeping in mind, we still have those examples from India and Brazil. We can learn lesson from them, or they started the process to ensure the food security of millions of people. They are food insecure. All the countries can take support from those initiatives and build their own local strategies.
At a juncture when Nepal is going to promulgate new constitution, and the Nepalese civil society as well as the government are in the process of drafting the new constitution. We are very much interested to include the issues that the agenda of right to food and food sovereignty in the new constitution, and in that respect whatever we learned from the experiences of Brazil and the experiences of India, that will be really very much helpful. The good parts, good examples can be incorporated into our struggles, our movements, to strengthen ourselves and to take our campaign further.
The global dialogues are a unique opportunity for countries of the South to learn from each other in the journey to realize the right to food. Not just learn about positive experiences, but also to learn about challenges and problems that countries like India and Brazil have faced. It offers policymakers and civil society activists a unique window into the processes, the challenges, the problems and the prospects in this journey of ensuring a world without malnutrition, a world where no one goes hungry, a world that is free of the scourge of malnutrition and hunger.
So what do we hope that these dialogues will accomplish? The hope is that, by listening to the debates in India and Brazil, in different parts of the world, people who influence policy, people who make policy, some ideas may find resonance, some bulbs may be lit somewhere, and new pathways illuminated, and towards a world in which no mother, no father has to teach their child how to sleep hungry. I think that's the ultimate hope that we have from these dialogues.